The Vietnamese teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, was fond of teaching people how to do eating meditation. And one of the things that I remember him saying, unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he would talk about being able, when you're eating, to see deeply into your food and deep enough to see the hands that made the food. Often he was teaching on retreat, so there were many hands making the food in the kitchen. And he wanted people to see deeply enough to see the farmer who grew it. Who planted it and labored over it, harvested it, got it to the market, and to see the sunshine itself, to see the sun and the seasons, the rain, all the things that come together for us to be able to eat food. How often do you eat that way? How often when you sit down to eat, do you actually see deeply into the food? I mean, in some ways it would be helpful if you just saw the food, period, It's beautiful. Food can be amazing, the colors, the textures. So just seeing it, but seeing through it in a way to see how it got there, what it took. Spent the day out in the garden, so maybe my mind's on this a bit. But I sometimes marvel at how I'm just able to, buy these seeds that come in a packet. And of course, somebody had to grow them and gather the seed. But even more than that, somebody years ago, millennia ago, had to gather these seeds with a great deal of mindfulness to choose the ones that were the best. And over centuries and millennia of selection in this way, we have the foods that we have. They're not just something somebody went out in the woods and picked up and planted, They have evolved with us, with human beings, through our care, through our attention. And so in the food is all of this history, all of this human attention and care. And many of the people who were caring probably did so with love for their families, for their children, for their elders. To be able to provide this, to know that this is what humans need to live. I am so grateful for the property that I live on. It's quite amazing. And it's amazing in part because of the people who lived here before me. We're only the third people to own this house. The previous owners were here for 24 years, and they planted these trees. They particularly planted flowering trees that were good for pollinators and for birds. They were birders. And so a lot of things produce berries. And it is really a very abundant kind of feeling here. And so in the springtime, I'm often grateful for their foresight and the way that they chose the trees that they chose, because the color starts with the species of dogwood I'm not really familiar with. It's not the usual one people plant in their yards that have the big flowers. You just have these yellow flowers. They're cornelian cherries, I guess is the name of them. I do actually know the name. Have these yellow flowers. They're the first ones out in the spring, and then the daffodils, the forsythia, and then the star magnolia is blooming, and there's a saucer magnolia that's opening up just now. You may have some of these in your own yard. Um, there's a beautiful crabapple tree, white crabapple tree, huge, that will flower soon in May. And other trees, I didn't even know before I came here. I didn't know what a fringe tree was. And it's a small tree that has these fringy flowers. And when the light shines through from the south and the house is north of it, it just, the fringe just glows. And there's a shad tree. There is a Korean mountain ash. I never even knew about this tree, but it's absolutely gorgeous. It does flower, but they're not very showy. But it's just a very sturdy, mighty tree with these big branches that go out farther in this direction than it is tall. So I'm going into this just, to remind you of what you are the heir of yourself. I sometimes think of how unless I go out of this house feet first, I'm probably going to sell it at some point. We'll sell it, move to something simpler, be able to keep up with the yard. And I think of all that I put into the garden, all the, actually use cardboard. I have a no-till kind of thing. And so put cardboard on it and it rots and it creates this really wonderful organic matter rich kind of soil. And I think somebody's going to inherit this someday. I hope they appreciate it. Then they might not. They might sow it over with grass because it's too much trouble. It's a lot of work to have a garden, and many people don't appreciate it. So I think about that sometime, that, what I put into this place, someone else will inherit. And it's kind of sad to me sometimes what consumer culture does to people. What monetizing everything does is that we sort of think of everything in terms of a dollar value, how much our house is going to be worth when we sell, and we'll get the money and we'll take it away. And that's our exchange. And that's all very good, but the people who lived here before me, they probably would have got the same amount of money for the house if they hadn't planted these trees. Trees are absolutely gorgeous, absolutely gratuitous, in their beauty. And the amount of birds that show up here, it's just amazing. I was watching this pair of red-tailed hawks today. I think they're mating. I suspect it was love, but they were doing these loop-de-loos in the sky, just a pair of them. And it was utterly beautiful. So, one of the delusions that we do in our ordinary human consciousness is called I making and my making, ahankara and mamankara in Pali. There's actual verb for doing this, selfing. We self. And it refers to that kind of not seeing through the conventional nature of ownership. Obviously there's something real about it, about boundary lines and property deeds. And we have this system, and we'd probably be in trouble without it, of property and transferring property. I don't mow other people's lawns. So there's something about the whole property thing that defines one's responsibility. But it's also an illusion. The earth doesn't know about property lines. The coyotes that come through here don't know about property lines. They couldn't care less, nor does the fox. Nor do the woodchucks care whether I think it's my garden. They don't really care about that. They love broccoli. They're going to come in when the broccoli is ripe and take some. They would, except for the coyotes and the foxes. So far, I've been pretty blessed when these critters have shown up, and there's plenty of brush around for them to nest in and have babies. They seem to disappear of their own, so that's helpful for my garden. But again, there's this illusion of mindness that humans slather over everything. And it's useful in certain ways, but it blinds us to the truth, that it really is conventional. And you can elect to put chemicals all over your lawn, but they don't stay there. You can say it's my lawn and I can do what I want with it, but they don't stay there. They go into the water, into the groundwater. We're all drinking them. So there's a consciousness here when we begin to see through the word mind. Treat it for what it is. It's a human convention. It makes things work. It makes it clear who is responsible for what. And yet sometimes it doesn't make it clear who's responsible for what. We don't actually know what the consequences of our actions are. Do we consider that? Every time we hop in our car, in our chariot of steel to ride around, we are burning fossil fuels. We are contributing to a huge problem. Sometimes these possessive words are helpful. It is our problem, in the sense of whose responsibility it is. It's also the tree's problem, the animal's problem, it's everybody's problem in terms of the consequences, but in terms of who can actually do something about it in a short amount of time, it's us. It's us. So seeing deeply involves seeing the interconnectedness of things. People like hearing that. It goes over better than not self-characteristic, which is kind of the Pali way of talking about it. Everybody likes the idea of a self. They don't like the not self side of stuff very much. But see, it's the same thing to talk about interconnectedness. And even the minerals of our body, this stuff, it's all taken from the earth. Everything in here, it's all come from the earth. It'll all go back to the earth. And the systems that evolved to take it from the earth and to construct this animal who walks on 2 feet and talks, the systems that had to be in place for that to come about are complex and reach back millions and millions of years. Just for us to talk. And then, the silly Zoom stuff, which is really quite recent, the ability to show up in each other's rooms based on electronics. It's amazing. So, interconnectedness. I know we're all busy living. which involves a lot of our attention just to do our jobs, our little slice of something we call our jobs that contributes to the whole. It takes a lot of attention, a lot of forethought, a lot of education and experience. It takes a lot. And sometimes it's easy to be so caught up in the what has to happen nextness of it, not to see deeply in this way that I'm talking about, not to see what's really in the things you're using. You know, just what it took to develop like pottery. Figure out how to do that. And think of what it was like to cook before that. You know, my mind, lands on these things because sometimes I just take a moment, and I would suggest you do this. You can maybe combine it with your meditation. After you're done with your meditation, just look around or stand up and walk around. Land on something. Let your eyes just land on something and just try to see what it took for that to exist and to be here. Just take a moment to let that in. I found this to be an enormously pleasurable and enriching kind of meditation, and one that just makes gratitude easy. Just to imagine what it took to get that here. And it's also really a helpful thing to do when you're taking out the trash, I have to say. It's kind of mind-boggling the amount of trash we produce and what it took to create those objects which we're throwing out. Thank goodness much of it's getting recycled these days, but not enough. Not enough. And, these different objects that could go into a landfill and be underground for millennia, millions of years, I don't even know. And so, again, it's a consciousness. My making and my making. Just one more, on that line, we're always thinking my thought. Oh, my heavens. All the things that had to go into a thought, language itself, all the kind of input from your parents that allowed you to speak, and of course, the whole history of the language behind that. And all of the ways they worked with your minds, and your teachers worked with your minds, and your peers worked with your mind. So that you can suddenly, at this point, have a thought and call it your own. Heavens. And then, of course, when you meditate, you intend not to think, and they happen anyway. They happen of themselves. Nobody like sets them loose. They're happening of themselves, like your heartbeat. Your thoughts are not that different than your heartbeat. Your mind's doing its thing, creating possible understandings of things. So, yes, my recommendation for the week. Just let your eyes fall on something at the end of your meditation and take a moment just to contemplate what it took to get that there.